Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in and working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Paul Martin. Today, I'm talking to Andrew Webb. By day, Andrew is a content marketer for a tech firm, but in his spare time, he helps attractions to use Lego as a tool to attract and engage diverse audiences and enable them to interpret history and culture. We're going to talk about what it means to be an AFOL, building a model of an Anglo Saxon helmet, and the 24 skills that are used when building with Lego. So welcome to the podcast. On Skip the Queue, we always start with some icebreaker questions that you know nothing about. So let's launch into a couple of those. Book and a pool or museums and galleries for your city break?
Museum and galleries.
Yeah. I'd expect nothing less given what we're about to talk about. This was one from one of my colleagues, actually, who is really good at icebreakers whenever we do a team building event. So he said, would you rather have it and lose it or never have it at all?
Oh, gosh. I'll have it and lose it, for sure.
Yeah, gotta be. That one's from Miles, so thank you, Miles. That was a cracker. Look,
do you remember the word? It was a great one. Would you rather eat 10 donuts or a raw onion?
Oh, 10 donuts, hand down. I could easily do that.
I get onion every time. I would take an onion over 10 donuts. I'd be sick after 10 donuts.
Oh, no, I reckon I could take that. No problem. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about your adventures in Lego over the last few years. So why don't we kick off and talk a little bit about your original interest in Lego? Because I know it goes back not a long way, because that would be rude, but it goes back to a few years ago, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, like most people growing up in what we might loosely term the West, I had Lego as a kid. You know, I think most of us grew up with it like that. And then, growing up in that first age of plastics with He-Man, Transformers, Lego, Star Wars, all of that sort of stuff. And then that was all.
You're just describing my childhood.
I mean, it's funny because it was all sort of ephemeral, right? I mean, the idea was that the reason why that boom happened, just to dwell on why Lego and plastic things, before that, toys were made out of either tin or wood. So, they were very labour intensive to produce. Then suddenly injection moulding comes along and we can just have anything. Coupled with the TV shows and the films and all this sort of stuff. So we all grew up in this sort of first age of disposable plastic. And then it all just gets passed down as kids grow up. It gets given away, it gets put in the loft and forgotten about. There's a moment when a Return of the Jedi bedspread doesn't look cool anymore, right? When you're trying to, you hit about 13, 14, and you're like, Mom, I really want some regular stuff now. So like everybody, I gave it all away, sold it, and whatever. But I kept on to my Lego. And then fast forward, I become a parent, and Lego starts to come back into my life. So I'm sort of at a stage where I'm working for a travel startup, and I get a press release to go to the Lego house, which, if no one has heard about it, where have you been? But also, it is a fantastic home of the brick, which Lego built opened in 2016, and it is a phenomenal temple to Lego. Not in terms of like a Legoland style approach with rides and things like that, but it's all about the brick and activities that you can do with brick. There is great pools and huge pits of Lego to play with there, as well as displays and all this sort of stuff. They've actually got a Lego Duplo waterfall of.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's a fantastic attraction, and the way they've done it is just incredible. So they blend a lot of digital things. So if you make a small fish and insert it into this thing, it appears in the tank and swims around and this sort of stuff. And the way you can imprint your designs on things. I should just quickly tell you about the cafeteria there as well, just really quickly. So the cafeteria at the Lego house, everyone gets a little bag of Lego, and then whatever you build and insert into this sort of iPad sort of slot type thing, that's what so a pink brick might be salmon, a yellow brick might be chicken, whatever, and you put it all in and it recognizes it all, and then it comes down a giant conveyor belt in a giant Lego box and is handed to you by robots. I mean, mind-blowing stuff. This is not like
amazing
with a tray at the National Trust place or somewhere like that. It is a technological marvel, absolutely fascinating. So, of course, on the day we went, it was a press preview, so there was no canteen workers, so there was no food in the box when me and my daughter opened it. So we went without that day. She was a bit disappointed, but that started that whole sort of a reappreciation of Lego, both as a toy to play with my daughter, but also as a way of using Lego in different ways, and that manifests itself in lots of different things. So currently now, fast forward a little bit, I use Lego for team building exercises, for workshops, for problem solving with organisations, and also just for having fun with adult groups as well as kids. And I think one of the biggest things we've seen since this kind of started around 2000s with the sort of adults reading Harry Potter. Do you remember that was like reading this children's book type of thing?
Yeah.
And then all the prequel Star Wars films came out, and Lego made sets about both those two things. And it kind of, Bionicle saved the company, as only AFOL will know, but it started that whole merchandising thing and adding Lego into that firmament of IP, right? And we fast forward now, and it's Marvel and Star Wars and everything.
You just said AFOL. I know what an AFOL is, but many of our listeners may not know what an AFOL is.
Just to go for acronyms here. So an AFOL is an adult fan of Lego. And we've seen actually Lego in the past 5 years, even earlier. I mean, Lego always had an adult element to it.
Yes.
One of the original founders used to use it for designing his own house, and there was a whole architectural system called Molyneux. So it's always had that element to it. But just recently, we've seen, almost retro sets. So we've seen a Lego Atari 2600 video game system from 1976, which...
Yeah, an original NES, wasn't there?
Exactly, and a SNES, that's come out. I've got a Lego Optimus Prime back here for Transformers, I've all that kind of stuff. So what's been really interesting is this kidult, or whatever, however you want to call it. And I think that's really fascinating, because if we think about Lego as a toy, we are rapidly approaching the age where we might have 3 generations of people that have grown up with Lego. Lego first came around in like the very late 60s, early 70s. And so it's not inconceivable that you might have 3 generations that had Lego as a child, especially if you grew up in Denmark. A little bit different when it would come to the rest of Europe as they expanded out. So I get to this point, and I'm doing... I'm getting into Lego and doing all this sort of stuff. And then, of course, COVID happens, and then lockdown happens. And we all think the world's going to end, and no one knows what kind of... Everyone's looking for hobbies, aren't they? What they say you were either hunk, drunk, or chunk after lockdown. You either got fit, got fat, or got alcoholic. So I was trying to avoid those 3 things. And everyone's looking for stuff to do. There's only so much banana bread you can bake. And so I stupidly, with my daughter's help, decided to make the Lego Sutton Hoo helmet, the 1,500-year-old Sutton Hoo helmet, found at Sutton Hoo in Suffolk, now in the British Museum. As you do.
I mean, just as you do. So just a slight segue. I was at the National Attractions Marketing Conference yesterday, and there were 2 people presenting who both talked about their experiences of wacky things that they did during lockdown. There was one person that opened a theatre in a back garden, and had various different stars just randomly turn up in her backyard, backyard up in North Yorkshire, and you choose to build a Lego Sutton Hoo helmet.
Lockdown, there'll be a time, I think, as we look back, tragic though it was, and a lot of people died, but it was that moment when society sort of shuffled around a bit, and people sort of thought, well, if I don't do it now, why not? People were launching bakeries in their kitchens and serving their community, and and that element of it. And so people have the good side of that, I suppose, is that people did find new outlets of creativity. Joe Wick's yoga classes in their front room, walking groups,
completely.
All this sort of stuff, and beating clothespins and learning to play the violin and just the stuff. Suddenly we had to find hobbies because we were all just in. No one was going to restaurants, no one was going to bars, no one was going to gigs, nightclubs, theatres. We all had to make entertainment at home. It was like the Middle Ages. So I decided to build the Lego Sutton Hoo helmet, as you do. And so I start this in lockdown. And then I get wind that Netflix is making a film called The Dig. And The Dig is all about... I think it's Lily James and Ray Fiennes in it, and it's all about, and those other people, and it's all about the when they found the Sutton Hoo helmet, and the guy who found it was called Basil Brown. He was asked by Edith Pretty, who owned the land, to excavate these humps in the ground that were on her estate.
So she owns this big estate in Suffolk, right? And so So she's got these. She can clearly see there's burial mounds in the back garden, but doesn't know what's in them. Doesn't have any clue that there's treasure locked up inside this.
I'm not even sure she knew there were Anglo Saxon burial mounds. I think it was
they were just lumps of ground in the garden,
and other stuff turned up over the years and whatever. And some of them were robbed, sort of Georgian times around then. So some people knew what they were, and they were somewhere excavated, and gold was taken to fund the Napoleonic Wars and whatnot. But she asked Basil Brown to do it, and he was like an amateur archaeologist, right? And so he was just like this local guy who would cycle over and do it. And the film goes into all that, and the film kind of portrays it as working class Basil Brown should know his place against the sort of British Museum, who are sort of the baddies in this film, or who think they know what to do. And of course, this is all set against the backdrop of war. So they excavated it all, then they had to rebury it, and then it was used as a tank training ground. So there was a tank rolled over it. So it's a miracle that anything was ever found. But when he did find the Sutton Hoote helmet and a bunch of other things, clasps, brooches, shields, weapons, whatever, when he did find it, so people think it kind of popped out the ground as a helmet, but it didn't. And if you look at the photos, it came out of the ground in hundreds of pieces.
Oh, really? Yeah. So you look at this reconstructed mask that's now in the British Museum, and you think, oh, so they just found that in one piece, lifted out as if it was a Lego hat, for a minifig in one piece.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
It's actually more like a big pile of Lego in the fact that it was just in hundreds of thousands of pieces. And so there was the first guy to have a go at it was an elderly architect at the British Museum who was, I think, blind in one eye, and he had a go at putting it all together, and he used an armature and clay and pins and whatever, put it all together, and said, yes, I think it was this. And then actually it wasn't. He got it all wrong, loads of different pieces after some more research. And then it falls to this Nigel Williams, who's another architect, and he was famous for, there was a famous Portland vase that was broken in a museum by someone pushing it over as a sort of what you might call like a Just Stop Oil type of protest now. I can't remember what the cause was, but someone smashed an exhibit, and he had painstakingly pieced all this together. He was a total dapper dude, 3-piece suit, Chelsea boots, proper swinging 60s, and he had to go and put it all together. And his version is the one that's in the British Museum. But he was a massive jigsaw fan, and if you think about Lego, what it is a 3D jigsaw. You get a bunch of pieces, completely, and you have to make it into a 3D sculpture. So that was one reason. The dig was the other reason. The third reason was the relationship between East Anglia and essentially Denmark and Billund and Anglo Saxon Jutland and all that area. I'm talking like Vikings and Anglo Saxons and invasions and all this kind of stuff against the native British. There is essentially a relationship between East Anglia, a trade relationship and a conquest relationship between them and Jutland. So I built this thing. And I frantically put it together, and I'm late nights and just losing my marbles trying to get this thing to work, because Lego is not designed to make like spherical shapes necessarily. It's quite blocky, right? Everyone knows this.
It's really easy to make a car, really easy to make a house, a spaceship.
Yeah, square stuff is fantastic. But making not only a sort of a semicircle, but a hemisphere, which is what essentially a helmet is even harder, because you have to get the Lego to bend in two directions. And so a lot of work went into that just to get it together. The actual face piece came together quite easy, and there was, once I had the scale of the pieces under the eyes that formed that sort of thing, and then I could build the nose and face. Ideally, it was going to be so that I could put it on my head. I've actually got a massive head, so in the end, I had to realign that and sort of make it into this sort of child-size head. But
it's a wearable thing, right?
It is wearable. I mean, it's at one point it was probably more fragile than the one in the British Museum, because it just kept dropping to pieces. So there's a lot of subplates that are holding together the outer plate. So it's actually just quick Lego terminology here. So bricks obviously are bricks. The flat things with bubbles on are called plates, and then the smoother ones are called tiles. Okay, and you use a combination of these to create there's also a technique called SNOT, which stands for studs not on top. We love acronyms in the Lego community, right? So if you say,
completely,
oh man, I'm an AFOL covered in snot, people know what you mean. So after a night on the tiles, I got covered. Yeah, anyway. What was I saying? So I make the helmet, I make the thing, and then I get a lot of support from the National Trust, specifically East of England National Trust and Sutton, who site itself, because it's their crown jewels. The British Museum, not so much, because they're just like, we've got a billion exhibits here. Sutton Helmet's just one of them. When you've got the Tutankhamun and the Rosetta Stone, it kind of pales into significance. So, but actually, they were helpful. And one of the curators there, who was on Twitter, who sent me a link to some 3D photos. Because if you Google it, it's all pictures of the front. That's fantastic. But what does the back look like?
Oh, right. Okay.
So actually, buried deep in the British Museum's website, in their research department, under a filing cabinet in the back of a server somewhere, are some quite technical photographic images of it turning every sort of 30 degrees, so that it's documented as to what it looks. Because you've got to remember that everything on the helmet is symbolic of various different things. There is symbols that mean there's a guy on a horse, who's sort of fighting and all this sort of stuff, and it all has quite a lot of meaning. Iconography from different parts of history as well. So there's some sort of Roman influencey things there and symbols. And so this whole thing is designed to be not only a battle helmet, but it's also, because remember, crowns haven't been invented yet. Crowns are a later medieval sort of invention. So this is both a symbol of authority headwear, like a crown, but also a weapon or a piece of defensive armor and equipment. So it has several functions in its life. So it's quite a complex piece of equipment that is a symbol of authority.
Yep.
So I make all this, and then I also submit it to a thing called Lego Ideas. So Lego Ideas is a fantastic program where anybody in the world, the members of the public, can submit Lego ideas, right? And they go onto a website. There's certain criteria. They have to meet a certain checklist, but then the rest of the public can vote for them. So, I mean, if Taylor Swift just stuck together a load of blocks and said, vote for this, she'd probably hit the 10,000 threshold instantly. But I'm not sure Lego would necessarily take that forward as a build. So there is a judging panel that...
Yes.
But actually, some of the most recent really fantastic sets have been... have come out of Lego Ideas, members of the public, and they're designing things that the Lego designers wouldn't have thought of themselves. So I think that's been kind of interesting. Sadly... we didn't make the 10,000 threshold. We did a lot of media coverage. By then, lockdown was over, and we were sort of getting back to our lives and all this sort of stuff. And my daughter was entering her dark ages, and so it sat in my studio for another sort of year and a half. And I thought, what am I going to do with this? And so in the end, I thought, well, do you know what? It's gathering dust here. I'm fed up with it. And so I actually approached Josh Ward at the National Trust at Sutton, who has been a fantastic advocate for Lego and for this particular project, and I have to thank him immensely for that. And they got some money and some funding to build a cabinet and also to house it, so I donated it to the National Trust, and it is now on display there as part of their firmament of interpretational.
Wow.
Because you've got to remember
that must feel pretty good for you.
It is quite good walking in there and watching kids go, wow. Because Lego is one of those things, it's instantly recognisable for kids. But Sutton Hill as a site is quite complex for children to contextualise, because essentially it's several mounds in the ground. And the helmet itself is at the British Museum, right? So they've got a replica built by the Royal Armouries. There were several of those. They've got those. They have loads of dress up. They have great explainers and videos, and they do a lot of work to show the size and shape and things. There's a cast iron sculpture to represent the boat, to show just how big it was, when it was pulled up from the sea because he was buried in a boat. So they do a lot of that work, that sort of work as well. But having this extra funding they opened up Edith Pretty's house now, and having this room where we've got some other things as well, like crayons and paper and other tools and drawings and colouring in and Lego, and a big chest of Lego, just helps, particularly smaller children who, by the time they've walked from the car park around the site and to Edith Pretty's house, probably flagging a little bit. And so just providing that little support for them, it's been a fantastic way to contextualise and to another way to interpret that. And I think more and more venues could look into that when you're thinking, well, how else can we add stuff, particularly for children, to help tell the story of this place?
Yeah, absolutely. We went to it was half term last week, and we went to the City Museum in Winchester. So they've got some medieval, they've got some Roman finds there, and it was lots of fun. But it was full of lots of ways for kids to engage. So there was trails to go around, there was colouring in, make your own medieval shield, and all of these things are ways that my 10-year-old could engage with it, because there's only so many glass cabinets of stuff dug up from the ground that she actually wants to look at.
I mean, I love Pitt Rivers, right, in Oxford. My favourite museum. Basically,
it's crazy, isn't it?
I love it. Around the world nicking stuff, right? But as a collection of objects, it's fantastic.
It's deeply unnerving.
Curators are listening there, nicking stuff. That's hard, but it is my favourite museum, because it's just. But for kids, it's probably really kind of like, how do you tell that story? I also think there was an article in The Guardian recently that. The cost of living crisis as well. Parents are looking for value solutions now, and so
yes,
I think it wasn't Peppa Pig World, it was Paddington World, and a family ticket is £170.
Yeah,
that is a huge dent in the family finances for a 70-minute experience. If you are watching the pennies, if you can afford that, look at that and save up for it and whatever. And I know these things are, memory making and all that sort of stuff. And I've been to Harry Potter with my daughter, and that is not cheap, but it's a fantastic day out, because once you're in, you spend the whole day there. And if you take a packed lunch, you can save a lot of money on the thing. So, but I suppose what I'm saying is that our museums and galleries, traditionally what you might call free spaces, public spaces, are facing unprecedented demand in terms of parents looking for cost-effective value days out, as well as funding being cut from central government and local government and that sort of stuff. So they have to do a huge amount with less and less for a bigger audience. And that is a strain on any institution and things like that. Other examples of places that get this. So obviously with the Sutton Who helmet, the Hold in Ipswich, which is Suffolk Council's kind of flagship museum in the county town of Ipswich. Instead of calling it, the Museum of Suffolk, they've called it the Hold, which is a reference to the fact it's on. I think it's either because it's on the shore or it's to do with sheep. I'm not sure. Anyway, but a fantastic space, contemporary modern space. Had a Lego exhibition a few years ago. Borrowed my helmet. Had some Lego exhibition stuff to do. And the good thing about that is when these teams have to do quite a lot of comms, marketing, and that has a cost as well. But often you see different demographics than perhaps would normally go to a Stones and Bones museum. Right, you'll see that it makes it more accessible to the community and to different people who don't like going and looking at the Magna Carta or whatever. Or a day for some kids, a day at the British Library is fantastic. Looking at all these old books. For maybe more boisterous children, that's probably not a really great idea. So I think galleries can take a leaf out of this and think, or museums or any institution really, can take a leaf out of this and think, how can we do more for less? And what tools can we have that perhaps we haven't considered before, like Lego, as a way to open up our interpretation and our offering? So this could work in Museum of Docklands, for example. This could work in the Royal Armouries. There's lots of places where if you looking to improve your children's offering, that some form of Lego. I mean, it ends up all over the floor. It ends up being taken away sometimes. You've got to watch out for things like that. But that's why I recommend like just the basic blocks and plates, not minifigures and stuff like that, because they just end up in kids' pockets and trousers.
Completely.
But I do think it is a fantastic tool for developing that interpretational piece.
So I run a coding club using Lego. Okay, so I work with years 4, 5, and 6 typically, and we normally start off by the end of 2 terms. We will be building robotics, programming things, doing amazing things. But we start at the very beginning with just open up a box, and it is amazing what a bunch of 7, 8, and 9-year-olds can do with a 2x4 red brick. Give them bricks. yeah, and they will build amazing things, yeah, and they will tell you amazing stories. And you also see real diversity in the behaviours of children, because some children in that free play context, they do not have the skills to do that. And I had one girl recently who hasn't played with Lego, and free play just blew her mind, and she was in tears because she couldn't embrace the creativity of it. But then the following week, when we were following instructions, she was great at building from a set of instructions. But you can do that from a limited palette. And give them a mission, Sutton Who, build I don't know, a sword, build a shield, build something to interpret what you have seen. You're in the transport museum, build. How did you get to the museum this morning? Give them something to do, and then let them go. And half an hour later, you will be amazed by what they will have built.
I actually did something like this at the National Archives down in Kew, where they had a kids' exhibition. Well, they had an exhibition in the summer about wacky inventions, because obviously the National Archives holds the patents for all these things, and they've got things like Victorian top hats with umbrellas in, and all this kind of crazy Heath Robinson style stuff that forks with 4 sets of tines so you can eat 4 times as much. It's just bonkers, really interesting. The curators have gone through and found this wacky world sort of. What's his name? The guy who illustrates Roald Dahl. They got illustrations and all that.
Quentin Blake.
Yeah, Quentin Blake, yeah. So they had this Quentin Blake sort of stuff, and like there was activities, and I came down for some special stuff because they had the first Lego brick patent in the UK when it was first launched in the UK in 1963, I think it was. That's when they filed the patent. And
I bet so that patent would be exactly the same as a 2x4 brick now, won't it?
The patent was for a 1x4 brick. I said Chipley Dawn, just three views, with what it was, a construction toy, and then the patent. And the address was just railway station, Billand. It wasn't like just all the mail just went to the railway station in Billand and just addressed for attention of Lego. And it's only it's not even a sheet of A4. It's a piece like this, and after it is something like a lamp that won't blow out on a thing, and before it's like some special kind of horse comb, but it's kind of this bonkers catalogue of just these things. But again, it was about we did some work. The curators and interpreters had kids analyse the patent to think what could it be, and look at the dates and structure, look at that. And then I came out and did some Lego. So we did things like who can build the longest bridge, who can build the tallest tower out of a single colour, those sorts of exercises. But then also the free play was build your own wacky invention. And kids were building automatic dog washers, where the dog ran on a thing and it scrubbed its back. And one kid built something that was like a thing for removing, getting pips out of apples. It was just like this sort of this crazy little tool that some sort of problem that he had. And I think what this also speaks to is developing those STEM skills in children and adults, and building that engineering. Because I've also ran Lego workshops with explorers who I thought were between Cubs and Scouts, but are actually after Scouts. So I did this in my local town here in Safford Walden, and was like, oh my God, these kids are like 15, 16. They're not going to want to play Lego. Some of them are my daughter's year at school. I was like, hello, Amy. And it was really interesting because we did a series of challenges with them. So the egg drop challenge: can you protect an egg and drop it from the floor? And can you build this and work together? Another good one is looker, runner, builder. So you give everybody 2 sets of the same bricks, and one person is the looker, one person is the runner, one person is the builder. So the looker can't touch, but he can tell the runner. The runner can't look at the model. He can only tell the builder, and the builder can't speak back. And so this is a really useful exercise, and I've done this with teams because this is exactly what businesses see. Engineering will build a product. Sales will do that, and then marketing are like, what the hell is, or whatever it might be.
It's that classic cartoon of a swing.
Yeah. So it's that, this is what the brief said. Engineering interpreter does this, marketing saw it. So it's a great tool for things like that, especially when you put people like the C-suite or CEOs or leaders at the end. And because all they're getting is the information, and it's how to build communication skills. Because in life, the situation is reversed. The CEO says, let's do this. And by the time it's cascaded down to engineering, who don't get a say, it's not at all what he imagined. So, or they imagined. So it's an interesting case of using tools like that. So I did that with these kids, and it was fascinating because they're 14, 15, 16. A group of 3 girls won 2 out of the 3 challenges, and probably could have
Really?
won if I felt that I couldn't award it to them again because it would just look weird. And they were smashing the run a builder thing. They were working together as a team. They were concentrated. They were solving problems. They were being creative. They took some time to prototype. They refined and iterated their design. They were doing all this sort of work, and it's brilliant because 15-year-old girls don't often take engineering-related STEM subjects at GCSE. Certainly probably don't take them at A-level, and more than enough. And I think that I once interviewed Eben Upton, who invented Raspberry Pi, and he said, we think about the 80s as this sort of like golden age of computing, but actually it was terrible. It was terrible for diversity. It was terrible for the inclusion. And he said, like, growing up, there was one other kid in his town that had a computer, so there was no sort of way to sort of get other people involved and make this accessible. And part of the reason our computers have got smaller, some of the work I did at PyTop was like trying to make technology more accessible and seeing it's not just video games and things like that, but actually I can use this in a fashion show, or I can make music, or I can use this to power some lights to do a theatre production, or and trying to bring the creative arts into technology, and that's when we start to see the interesting application of technology. And Lego plays a part in that, in the fact that it is a tool, a rapid prototyping tool that everybody's familiar with, and it is also clean, safe. You don't need blow torches and saws and those sorts of things to kind of prototype anything. You don't even need a pair of scissors. It's completely tool-free, unless you have that little mini separator to get your bricks apart. But and so I think that just to circle back on like how the Science Museum or the what's the one down there is a Kinderbar Brunel Museum and things like that. I can see those guys could be and should be thinking about how can we have a Lego program. You don't have to have a permanent deployment like they've got at Sutton Hoo, although that is great because they've got the mast there as the headpiece of it. But certainly a program of events or summer camps or summer events. Because I did this with English Heritage at Kenilworth Castle as well. They were having like a big Lego build, and the public were invited in 15-minute shifts into a big marquee. Everyone got given a tile, and the idea was to build the gardens, because the gardens at Kenilworth Castle were laid out to impress Elizabeth I. And so there was like bunches of stuff and regular bricks, but also flowers and this sort of stuff. And it was like, come on, we've got to build something to impress a queen. And you said to kids, like, you've got to impress, bling it up, like dial it to 10. And we were just getting these enormous, like, avatar-sized trees with just incredible bits hanging off it, and like, this is a teapot because she might want a cup of tea. And you're like, brilliant. Excellent. Of course she does. And so I think that, and then they moved through, some of the Legos were selected to be displayed and things like that. So there's different ways you can do it. You can either do it as like, and I'm a big fan of the drop-in sessions, because kids and parents can just naturally build it into their day rather than the pre-book. When my child was, we were rubbish at like organising things. He'd be like, oh great, half term, it's a chocolate thing, sold out. And you're like, because there's 30 spaces for 3,500 kids who want to do it. Whereas if it's like a walkthrough or a in-group phase through, and then the activity is small, kids kind of conk out after about 20 minutes, half an hour anyway. You get much more people through, and much more people get to enjoy the experience rather than the 30 organised people who were, got up early and booked. So that's my other top tip to any institution, because it's heavily weather dependent as well. Sun comes out, everyone piles into the nearest sort of stately home, national attraction. Like all of those places can definitely benefit. English Heritage did a really big push this half term just gone on Lego at several events. We had one here at Audley End. There was one at Kenilworth that I was at. There's been various other ones all around the country. Because again, it's you just need a marquee, which most venues have access to because they use them for other things, or some sort of space in case it rains. and you just see someone like me in a whole massive tub of Lego, and you're off to the races.
Exactly. So we were talking about this at the conference yesterday about ways in which it for many attractions, people turning up is a literal flip of a coin. Is the weather good or is the weather bad? What can you do to adapt your attraction to be able to deal with when it's bad? And then what can you do to bring people when you have made that adaptation? So, you've now got a marquee and you have a Lego exhibit that you can put into there. So it's just dumping a pile of Lego and a bunch of well-trained volunteers or visitor experience people who can facilitate that, police it, little Johnny sticking minifigs in his pocket. And then you turn on your Google AdWords and show that you've got this bad weather reason to go to a stately home that my daughter would turn her nose up to. All of a sudden, okay, we're going to go and do that. We're going to go and have afternoon tea, and you're going to go and play with some Lego and see some animals. Maybe what can you do to attract that extra audience and adapt to the bad weather and service different sorts of people?
I think that comes down to, bear in mind, I come out from my Lego lens rather than a venue lens. But I think, speaking as a parent and someone who does this, is you need a reason to go back to somewhere that you already know. Okay, so you go to Stonehenge, you go and look at the stones, you go, wow, you look at the visitor centre, and then it's ticked off. I mean, you see busloads of tourists. Stonehenge is at Cambridge, maybe, or Oxford. When people do England, land in Heathrow, London, Crown Jewels, Tower Bridge, West End, day trip out on a coach to Stonehenge, maybe to Cambridge, and that's it, off to Paris. Right, so, but parents, people like British people like that too. Like, why go to Stonehenge 4 times a year, or why go to any venue when you're familiar with it? It's always about offering something new and something different. So Audley End, near where I live, is Heritage. All through July, every Sunday, they're just doing music. So there'll be a string quartet or someone with a harp or maybe someone with a guitar or whatever. But and you've got a book, but it's not like there's 30 places and it's a bun fight. It's just like, oh wow, there's something different. Or they do a really great thing, like they do Victorian falconry, for example. So they get someone in who talks about how the Victorians use falconry for hunting as a sport, but also for the kitchen table. And they're flying falcons around and doing the whole bit of meat on a string and all this sort of stuff. And everyone they do a World War II one. I mean, the editorial calendar for any venue's got to look like, come and make Christmas food. January we're closed to kind of dust and clean everything. Valentine's Day, chocolate making, but it's daffodils, it's whatever it might be, and then you just build that program in, and you need. This is why I think that venues now, again, and just come back to that, you talk about AdWords, but that again is more spend. It's like, how do you build that mail list? How do you drop into the local Facebook groups and Mumsnet and all that kind of stuff? That's where you can do it organically, rather than, because people don't sit in front of Google necessarily or think like, what?
No, you sit on the sofa on a Thursday night trying to figure out what on earth are we going to do this weekend. Yeah, so you're completely right. The Mumsnet, the content marketing is hugely important, isn't it?
Which is my day job, but also it's kind of like how can institutions become part of that? When I say community, if you think about, most people travel a thin hour to go somewhere. I mean, people go further afield, but basically you want to. I think we talked about this in the recce call. It's like what my mum terms like a tea and a pig. So you've got to go somewhere. You've got to have a cup of tea, visit the loos. It's all about tea. It's all about canteens and loos, basically. You can have a World Heritage site, UNESCO World Heritage site, and it's like, how good's the calf, and are the toilets clean? that's what people remember. God, I went to Stonehenge at dawn. I was awed by the majestic, but that loo needed cleaning. It's not good. It's all that people come home with. So, institutions, galleries, places that they are trying to offer different things like late nights. We've talked about that. How can we use this space after hours? Because if you think about it, if your institution's open 10 till 6, most people are at work 5 days a week. You're going to have students and pensioners who are going to be not great spenders, either of those two groups. So late nights. I went to a great one at the National Gallery when the James Bond film, because it was Casino Royale or whatever. He's still on the top of the National Gallery overlooking Trafalgar Square, and they've got the national dining rooms there, and they had the Vespa Martini with a cocktail, and then we went to look at the Fighting Temeraire, which is the bit where he's standing with Q, the new Q, who voices Paddington, whose name escapes me. And gives him like a gun and a radio, but they're like the Fighting Temeraire by Turner is this sort of thing, and so that you've got to make hay out of that, right? You've got to sort of like do a late night, and they had various ones, and so all it was a few cocktails in the cafe next door and a talk by the curator and stuff like that. But 30 people just looking for an experience, and so if venues are clever. Of course, the dark side of this is when you get Willy Wonka World up in Scotland, or interestingly, some of the Lego events that have been happening at NEC have caused a massive online backlash in the community for just being exceptionally bad value for money. And so you read about these like things that people have said, come and visit Santa's grotto, and it's just a muddy field with a tree in it. So you've got to be careful. But I think those events, those sort of fly-by-night kind of institutions, don't really work. But how galleries can leverage the creativity of what they're doing, whether they are come and paint in our local gallery, come and have an art class, come and do it. People are looking for stuff to do that is value for money, that isn't always drink led, it's not always cocktail making or things like that, and that comes with a whole heap of other things and dietary requirements for cookery courses and just clean up and the mess and all that kind of stuff. So I think that canny organisations, the ones that can really think about that, and I'm happy to help organisations who want to think about this, especially through the eye of Lego. They will be the ones that will start to add and build out and develop their, what you might term, and this whole sector needs a name, their kind of extracurricular offering, we might say, above and beyond their collection and their traditional interpretation.
And if they're thinking of doing this, so there's a good why. Yeah, the why is you can reach diverse audiences, helps people with interpretation.
Quite cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cheap way of extending your offering and diversifying what you do. You can bring in event elements to this, but how do they do it? Apart from engaging with somebody like you, and I'm going to guess there's not many people like you, so that's going to be a tricky thing for some people to do. But if they were starting from scratch, how would they go about doing this? You said earlier, don't go mad with buying the bricks and spending a fortune on.
There are people like me and that can do all this, and as well as myself. I think that the first thing is plan it. Plan what you need to do. You can't throw this stuff together. You might be looking at already. The Hold have been contacting me for a late night they're doing in September. They contacted me in April, right?
Okay.
Because if you're a creator, you're planning exhibitions, you are thinking on that long-term cycle.
Yeah,
anyway.
Completely.
And so what you need to do is bake this in as part of that curational process or part of the interpretational thing at the start, rather than like, oh, right, we're doing an exhibit on Peter Rabbit, let's chuck in a load of fluffy bunnies or whatever. It's got to be, you've got to think about it and have it contextualized. I think the best things are what success looks like is, first of all, you need a space. Now, you can hire a marquee. That comes with a cost. If you're a venue and you've got your own, or you've got a hall or a stables or an interpretational room or something like that. Or often spaces, especially the bigger ones, will have classroom spaces for school groups anyway. So that's often that can be where you can host these sorts of events. Kids are very familiar. The chairs are all small, wall colour, et cetera, et cetera. Industrial strength carpet in case stuff gets spilled. So the location is like where you're going to stage this. Secondly, I think you need to think about what do we want people to do? What is the experience? What is the narrative piece? Because you can't just say, here's a big pile of Lego. Kids will just build cars and houses, right? They're just going to. They need context. If you give a kid a sheet of paper, you can draw anything. They're like, well, what? And so you need to give them a mission almost. They need a task. I think also think about, as I said before, keeping the task to around 20 minutes, because actually adding the time running out jeopardy element is quite fun for kids, because they'll go, well, I've only got 5 minutes left, and often that's when it all falls apart, and then they have to iterate the design.
Yes.
With a Lego. So think about that kind of moving people through in 15 to 20 minute cycles. We had kids that would go out the exit and just walk back round and come in the front like 4 or 5 times. One boy came in, he was loving it. So think about that. Think about how you're going to move people through the space. Think about what you need to envisage it. So, if the Kenilworth, for example, there was me hosting it from dawn till dusk. We had another builder there who was helping break it all down and put them against the model that we built. There were 2 members of staff who were letting people through, so just monitoring it from an entry-exit point of view, walking through in case people had issues and things like that. And think about when you're going to do it. Okay, so half term's a good one. It's a good thing to do. We saw a lot of this at Kenilworth, but I've seen it at other places as well. Particularly on half terms and things like that, you often see grandparents caring for grandchildren, right? Because parents are at work. And grandparents can only walk around a site so much before they want to sit down. So sometimes have it think about where they could. And we when I was at Kenilworth, this grandparents came in with their 2 grandkids, and the kids started playing, and I was like, "You could join in too." "Oh, no, I don't want to." They were almost like, "I can't do this." It's like, "Come on, get in." He's like, "Come on, Grandma, come on. I'll show you how it works." By the end of that session, they were memory making. I then took their photo with their phones. They'd had this sort of grandparent, but you always say it like my grandfather taught me to fish, like Sean Connery says in The Hunt for Red October. This sort of moment where it's a Hollywood trope that grandfather knowledge is sort of passed on type of thing, right? And so you can see that where you could have this almost either the reverse of that of kids showing grandparents, but also they're all having this about outside of the parental unit. So it's a new type of experience. It adds value. It gets people to play with their grandkids and more than that, rather than just kicking the ball about, which a lot of them couldn't quite do. So I think that's kind of an interesting way. So think about when, think about where, and think about what will be my 3 sort of tips for any institution looking to put this together. The other thing
you gave one the other day, which I thought was priceless, which was don't give them wheels.
Oh yes.
Don't include the wheels.
Yeah. Take the wheels out of any sets, unless you are the transport museum or the a car-based museum, because kids will do wings as well. I'd probably suggest taking those out because kids will just build cars. Some kids will just build cars, even if you give them a mission, unless that is the mission. The other thing that I would think that venues could do, as well as sort of all-day events, because it's quite a time drain, on staff and this sort of stuff, but it does have value. The other thing you can think about is one-off evening events for adults. So I've done this. I did this at my local Adnam shops, bricks, beers and bubbles, challenges. People come as teams. Think of it like a pub quiz with bricks as the answer. So build me a thing that does that, that kind of thing. Teams all get together. You can race them. You can see who goes the furthest. You can do all this stuff. And the Hold, that's what I'm doing at the Hold in September. I did it at the Hold a couple of years ago. And what was interesting was that we had quite diverse groups of adults. We had just couples who were clearly AFOLs and were like, yeah, I'm going to go to that. We had a group of friends. One of them had just come back from a year's travelling, and they didn't want to go sort of straight to the pub and just interrogate him about his travelling or whatever. They kind of like, well, we wanted something to do where we could have a beer and have a chat, but we were doing something else whilst we were doing that. And that's the joy of Lego, that your hands are doing the work, and you're almost like the back of your brain is doing the work. And you're like, oh, yeah, before you kick it in. And the concentration levels, and then you can kind of get into that state of flow. And so they were just having this lovely chat, had a beer, talking about stuff, but also memory making in terms of when he came back from his travelling. So I think that's really important. Did you know that this is your brain, right? And then your brain on Lego, there are 24 discrete skills that are happening in your brain. So Lego researched this. Things like
I just think this is
fine motor skills, cognitive sort of kind of thinking about things, future planning. My favourite, emotional regulation, i.e., not going, oh my god, it's not working, and smashing it all to pieces. So I've seen this as well with children. Is that when you give them a Lego, if you gave them jelly and a football, they're high energy kind of things, right? And that's fine. Great outdoors, kids want to burn off energy. Here's a load of balls, go crazy, right? Or ball pits, trampolines, bouncy castles, those sorts of things. When you get on Lego, what actually happens is it's very hard to be anarchic, to use a wrong word, but a word. It's very hard to be anarchic with Lego because you can't really do it. And so you can get a group of kids together and they'll almost self-invigilate. And at one point, I ran it at a local toy shop and the parents were all hanging about and like, I've never seen them so quiet. they were just in the state of flow. And so I think, again, back to the Explorers and the Scouts, that was one of the best sessions that those kids had done as teenagers, because the reason was they were given permission to play with Lego. They still had the muscle memory from when they were smaller children. They were solving. They weren't just being told to play with Lego. They were actually solving engineering challenges. How can you design a bridge that will take this weight? How can you protect an egg? How can you think about this? And so you need to think about the challenge and the what. You need to think about the where, and you need to think about the when, as I said. And get those right, you can have a very exceptional visitor experience for not a huge amount of effort. It's not highly costly. It's not highly technical. It's just a bit of elbow grease and a bit of forward thinking in terms of what we might need. And I think that parents appreciate just that minute away where they can. It's almost like a 20-minute babysitter, right? Where they can just go, don't touch that. You're walking around a stately home. Don't sit there. Don't touch. Mind the lady. All that kind of no data that parents give out in institutions. They could just take a breather and check their phones and whatever.
And the kids are having an amazing time.
Yeah, so. and the kids are happy. And at the end of the day, as a parent, you're doing it. We all do our best, and you just want them to be playing with something screen free, getting along, and learning something. And that is the win. That is the ultimate takeout. You can layer on your own institution and context and rev up the visitor experience, bring in new visitors, attract a more diverse group of people that perhaps wouldn't normally come to, a Regency Rococo style villa or whatever it might be. Then that's all to the better, because
everyone's happy.
Use this in your planning, and you can do what Sutton Who did and go, right, well, we've done this and it's really worked, and then I can apply for funding for it. And I can expand
completely.
it, and I can make it permanent. And then I can sort of say, well, this now becomes a tool and a string and our bow for our educational. It doesn't have to be split between visitor attractions and development. You can split it between several parts of the institution and use it in different ways. Use it for educational purposes as well as visitor experience. So the world's your oyster with a bit of thinking.
With a bit of Lego and a bit of thinking.
A bit of Lego,
your world's your oyster.
Yeah, a few bricks and a couple of tricks, and you're off to the races.
Look, Andrew, this has been brilliant. Thank you ever so much. I've got one more question for you before we finish.
Oh, gosh.
Now, you bottled this earlier on. When I said we always have a book recommendation from our guests, and you, in spite of having the fullest bookshelf I've seen in quite a long time, you bottled it on a book, but you did offer me a favourite movie, and so what would be your movie recommendation of choice?
Like, my go-to movie would probably be With Nell and I. Richard E. Grant's first film. Every line has came down from God on a tablet. It is just... Richard Griffiths as Uncle Monty, Paul McGann. It's just one of my favourite films. Cult classic that no one's really... Well, people have heard of it now. But again... Yes. They even make stuff out with Nell and I, right? So you can go and watch a screening of it at the farm at Crow Crag up in Penrith, and everyone dresses up, and everyone Mr. Blathering sets tea, and I've come on holiday by mistake and dresses as Danny, and fortunately, for better or for worse, I know these are tough times, but people try and find the fun.
Yes,
in things they try and at the end of the day, everyone's looking for a good time, whether you're a children or an adult. You want something to just have a laugh and take you away for a moment. And if films and culture, but also experiences can do that, then that's all for the good.
Well, look, this is going to be a challenge, but listeners, if you would like a copy of Andrew's film recommendation, then when we release the show message on X, if you can retweet that and say, give me Andrew's movie, then the first person that does that, somehow I will get the movie to you. It might be on VHS, it might be on DVD, but somehow we will get you a movie.
I found a CD
Andrew.
the other day from a bar I used to go to in Clapham in the noughties and late 90s. And I said to my mate, "Look, I found this CD." He went, "Great, put it on." And I went, "I can't. I haven't got a CD player anymore. I had to go dig through a box somewhere in the study to find a portable CD player that plugged into my computer that could. By the end of it, we're just forget it."
Andrew, this has been wonderful. Thank you ever so much.
You're welcome.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others to find us. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them to increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcripts from this episode and more over on our website, skipthequeue.fm.